The Holy Father is saddened to learn of the death of former President George Bush. In a telegram, Secretary of State Pietro Parolin writes, Pope Francis offers heartfelt condolences and the assurance of his prayers to all the Bush family. Vatican Correspondent Juliet Linley joins us from Rome. Juliet, how were relations between the U.S. and the Vatican during President Bush's term?
Lauren, the two met twice at the Vatican when Bush was in office, once in May 1989, the second time in November 1991, and the Berlin Wall fell, as we know, in 1989, so the end of the Cold War and the disintegration of the Soviet Union were the backdrop for much of Bush's presidency. A common goal for both the U.S. and the Vatican at the time was creating a stable post-communist Europe, and John Paul II had lived under both Nazism and communism in his native Poland, where the Catholic Church was greatly oppressed. The Polish Pope was vehemently anti-communist, as you will remember, and he was especially opposed to atheism, which he said was so detrimental to human dignity and authentic freedom. Now, in that, they found a lot of common ground with the Reagan-Bush administration. And as Vice President, Bush was a key figure in helping President Ronald Reagan fight the Soviet empire.
How is President H.W. Bush being remembered today and this week in Rome?
Lauren, I spoke with Father John Walk, who worked in the Bush 41 administration before becoming a priest, and he says the united front presented by the Holy See and the U.S. against communism was remarkable. President Bush and JP2 were known to have a good relationship, and when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990, setting off Gulf War #1, the Vatican didn't show strong opposition. Now, remember, both Bush Sr. and Jr. came to Rome back in 2005 for the funeral of John Paul II, and the U.S. Embassy to Italy has opened a condolence book for Bush 41. Diplomats living here are encouraged to sign it, and at the embassy, the American flag is flying at half-staff today, Lauren.
How did President Reagan's relationship with Pope John Paul influence President Bush's relationship with the Vatican?
Well, Reagan and JP2 had a very strong bond throughout the 80s. Reagan was a Presbyterian, and he had a lot of affection for the Holy Father and for the Catholic Church. The two met at the Vatican behind closed doors in 1982, and that, Lauren, was the first time in history that a U.S. president and a pope met alone. The U.S. established diplomatic ties with the Holy See that same year. And George H.W. Bush was vice president at the time and an expert in foreign policy. And when Ronald Reagan died in 2004, John Paul II sent a tribute recognizing his, quote, unwavering commitment to the cause of freedom. Bush inherited that long-standing cooperation when he succeeded Reagan as president in 1988.
Juliet Linley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.